I am so freaking excited to introduce you guys to my dear friend, Alex Mischka. Before I let him speak, I want to just give him the recognition he deserves because he's an amazing individual. And I want to share with you like why he's here. So I really see Alex as an expert in the field of intimacy and relationships and embodiment and the erotic. Like this guy knows his stuff, and we've had many, many conversations about these things. And so today is going to be the first of many conversations we have with him on the show. Um, since meeting Alex and getting to know him, I really recognize you, Alex, in the way you're able, like the way you're just so dedicated to your mastering your own like programming and deconditioning and mastering the systems that you work with. Like I really see your process like coming through so clearly and your dedication to the women and men that you work with. And I also really see the way you embody what you guide because of that. And that's like, as a woman, like it just feels really good in my body and my nervous system, knowing a man like you is out there creating ripples and change in people's lives. So like, thank you so, so much for doing that. And I just love the way you embody leadership and love and integrity with your energy. And I'm just so excited to have you on. Thank you for letting me love on you to start the episode. And thank you for being here so, so much.
Wow. Where do I go from there? Thank you so much. We've struck up quite an amazing connection and friendship and kind of collaborative climate between us both. And since I discovered your work, I've been consistently hooked on the transmissions and the energy coming through and the textures coming through from you. And so the feeling is mutual, and this is not a case of me just batting back compliments because I can't take the compliment. I really receive what you've just said there. It's so satisfying and nourishing for a man to hear that from a woman of your caliber. And I don't take this lightly. Like this is my dharma.
Mm-hmm.
We've both found dharma, and so to have other peers in the field recognize, to be recognized is quite an incredible feeling. So thank you for such a warm introduction.
You're so
So
welcome.
excited to be.
I mean, we we do complementary work to each other, and the crossover is really like the feminine and embodiment, and Alex does like a lot of counterpart work. But I also see like my area of expertise is around the emotional body and emotional fluency and mastery within like relationships and things like that. And Alex has got more of the sexual tone, so an embodiment of the sexuality and sensuality too. And I think there's a big area where this crosses over that doesn't really get discussed very much. And so a lot of our conversations stem from this place, and they steep and they, get all delicious and good. And we've been talking a lot about a certain topic, which we'll be exploring on the show for how many weeks now? Like maybe 2 months. Long time.
Yeah.
Like for a long time. And we've known each other for over a year now, just through the good old Instagram. So I'm very grateful for that app and meeting Alex, because we've been able to, as you often say, have a good rally of tennis, like back and forth with different concepts and really asking more questions, and we come up with answers. Like before we hit record, we were talking about how important it is to not always have the answer, but how valuable the questions are. So whilst we discuss a lot of things, we probably will ask more questions than provide answers. And I think that's really important in our day and age, to be more curious and to explore more. So looking forward to diving into this with you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And you set the tone beautifully. The way you've approached this podcast and the spirit of the podcast is about exploration and inquiry, and more, maybe more questions than answers. That really takes the pressure off, because I think there's a lot of pressure in this field to kind of have it all figured out, right, and be an authority. And yeah, we are definitely authorities in our fields. We've committed to this so deeply, right? It's a real stake in the ground. Like I'm all in, 100% in to figure out and find out and explore what this is. But it's a great big mystery. So thank you for setting the scene.
Yeah, and I really, whilst we're becoming these like outer authorities, like through our experiences and following our dharma, as you said, really my intention is to bring individuals to their own authority, to their own sovereignty, and the best way I see to do that is ask questions. So, here we go. But before we fully like dive into this exploration around polarity, I'd love you to, for the listeners, just a little quick synopsis of what you see in the world through your lens and your system, and what your systems are for viewing the world, and human beings and relationships. So a little bit of what you do and what patterns you sort of see through your lens.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really original way of asking that question of where am I now and what is alive? But there are three primary fields that I work within: embodied Menswork, intimacy and relationship, and I guess the world of the erotic and the erotic blueprints. The Menswork field has taken precedence. That's the main tip of the spear right now. I'm fascinated by human relationship, how we as individuated beings come to wholeness within ourselves, and then redefine what relationship means in this time, because I think we're living through a time of obviously great change. I mean, it's quite clear that everything's just coming apart, and if you study integral theory, they have that model is a really good way of looking what's happening in the collective consciousness and in our individual consciousness. So I guess the work is really about helping people come home to themselves. The heart wants to go home, so I try and help people get there. Yeah.
What do you see as like one of the biggest things that stops people from connecting to their heart, Alex?
Yeah. The conditioning of our reality is thick. It's like mud out there, and it's a mission. Again, it's relating in the matrix. We are whatever this matrix, this fabrication that's been fabricated over the top of the kind of pure state organic reality that we have access to. It's thick. There's a lot of deprogramming to do, and a lot of kind of returning to who am I without all of these layers on top that have been plastered on top of us through the schooling system, through watching the modeling of our parents, through dysfunctional relating and social dynamics that aren't we've not what are we modeled? If you look at every TV program and film, it's all mostly dysfunction.
Yeah.
So we have to come back and find it for ourselves, and find teachers and find ways of doing this. And obviously there are great luminaries and amazing books and movements that start up and flourish, and obviously one of those movements is the polarity movement.
Yeah. I was going to ask you if you could share not only your definition of polarity, but a little bit about its origins for anyone listening who is like hearing this for the first time.
Yeah. The word is alive a lot now. It's become a kind of a movement slash brand, if maybe that's the right word. And it's kind of a new thing in the last 3 or 4 decades. It kind of appeared, and obviously we have the world of duality, like yin and yang, and the Taoist teachings, and we live in this, a reality that has dark and light and has many opposites. Okay, so obviously polarity, if you think of physics, is just a natural aspect of creation. Beautiful. Somehow it found its way into relationship teachings and helping men understanding women, women understanding man. And I'm sure I hope everyone is familiar with David Deida, because he was one of the main proponents of this work. And he had his teachers, and it kind of just evolved over the last few decades as a living, breathing kind of art that people can understand within themselves. And then many teachers have appeared, And I wouldn't say there is a lineage, because there's no official initiation into this teaching. But there is a rich history of people who have kind of carried the work,
Right.
and kind of distilled it into their own understanding and their own experience. And so there are lots of teachers out there, especially on Instagram, talking about this subject. And what
Right.
we've found is that there are quite a lot of ideas that seem to be getting quite fixed and dogmatic, and the living, breathing mystery is expanding and evolving. So I think we're here to unpack a bit of that.
Yeah, I like as this conversation continues to unfold, we're going to get into more of like the tropes and the dogmatic nature. And like before we go into that, it's like I have total respect for you and this, movement, body of work, but like it's from physics. Like the more you look into life and try and understand it, the closer to this you get. But as human beings, we tend to get dogmatic about things. We tend to like find something that has worked for us, and instead of like moving and breathing with it as a living organism, we get so rigid around it and hardened around it. And so this conversation feels really important. And like just to take a few steps back, I wanted to have this conversation because a lot of the women that I've worked with, primarily through the archetypal rites of passage, and this like psycho-spiritual maturation process as we, develop through as women and like become women from maidens, there tends to be this a small percentage of women that come out of that experience so hungry to understand not only their own sexuality that gets reawakened, but like the masculine counterpart to this. And so they, as this small percentage, gets drawn to polarity. And I know that was my experience. I was like, wow, just really moving towards like David Data and the John Winelands. I've been on my own journey with that. I don't know if that'll come up later in this conversation, but there's this need that polarity provides, like to complete into wholeness, like the two halves like coming together. And the reason I wanted to have this conversation was to really just create more awareness and inquiry around that if my listeners are resonating with that in their own journey, like how can they approach it, not as to fill the void of the thing that they're looking for to create wholeness, but like just have a deeper exploration of that and to allow their journey of becoming woman to really be flourished by a healthy masculine counterpart. So that's the bit of the backstory around why we're having this conversation, because there were certain things that I was seeing and I was like, well, this is a bit precarious. And I want to talk to Alex about it, because you really, embody lovership and leadership. And there was this one conversation that we were talking about surrendering as the feminine to the masculine leadership. And I, further down the line in my own embodiment, I was like, oh, this language seems problematic. And so I would love to hear a little bit more, Alex, about how leadership and lovership come into play within polarity, in your body of work, what you see with your clients, and maybe your own experience of that.
Yeah, beautifully distilled. Yeah, this field of the masculine and the feminine, or the alpha and the alpha and the omega, these opposing dynamics, these opposing forces that create lots of tension and pressure and release. So it's working with, to me, it's the feeling of working with pressure, tension, and release. Like, how does that dynamic energy appear? And it's all energy at the end of the day. And we all have this energy within us, however we want to describe it. And that's why I loved your work when I encountered it, because the work you were doing with the archetypal realm, and especially the mother wound and the father wound, right? Which is the underpinning of all of this work at the end of the day. And helping people come back to a sense of wholeness through that journey. So the work I do mostly with men, but I also work with women, is about accessing the archetypal realm. in the spectrum of dark and light.
Mhm.
There is the mythopoetic style of Menswork, which is more about the magician, warrior, the king, the lover, and working with the inner child, which is beautiful, beautiful work. And I love that field of Menswork. It's so valuable.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, there is a slightly newer flavor of Menswork, which is the embodied Menswork field.
Mm.
And this works really, really does work with masculine and feminine energy, helping men find ways to integrate this energy. And it isn't just about becoming strong alpha man. It's about how do we open and surrender and receive what's really in us and allow that to move through us.
Mm.
It's like, Carl Jung said, one of the greatest journeys a man can make is wedding his inner anima
Mhm.
and coming home to those internal projections which were developed at a very early age, those internal energies which were received through every interaction we had with the feminine. So the journey is about coming home to both those forces, and how do we feel them within us? How do we employ them? How do we work with them? How do we have an artistic relationship with them? And then how do we have an artistic relationship when we find these forces in other people?
Right.
Instead of it being fixed, I am man, I am strong leader, I will do masculine. It's like, no, there's so much subtlety and nuance in there if you
Mhm.
want to be a creative leader and a creative force of nature.
Yeah. Oh, and this is the thing too. It's like very easy for people to just divide things off. And it's like, this is my role, that's your role,
Yeah.
or this is this part of me, that's this part of me. But what's really interesting is like where they come together and how they interact. And it's so beautiful because when you were talking about like the tension and pressure, like in your body, you can feel what that is like. And even though we're coming at it from like mind, body, spirit, energy, like all the systems that make a human being, um, it's just, I don't know, it's just so exciting to me that more men are coming to explore this within themselves, and like particularly like the tension pressure points of integrating the anima, the feminine within them.
Yeah, 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 beautifully put. It's I love helping men find their grounding first, find the floor, find their feet on the floor, like to become bottom heavy.
Mm.
And then working with their core, like the space between their hips, like their genitals, like a man's penetrating pole is his genitals, right? It's
Mhm.
his cock, his testicles, his prostate.
Mhm.
I think the heart work is super important, and there's a very common phrase in the men's work field of coming down out of the head into the heart, right? Which is
Yeah.
beautiful. Fully support that. We've got to feel and express what is there as a way to access and process, because we've been cut off from accessing and processing our emotion. It
Yeah.
is culturally conditioned, right? And we just don't have access to it. The tribe has been taken away. We don't have rites of passage. We have had to recreate it for ourselves. So the sisterhood is strong now. The brotherhood is getting stronger.
Mhm.
Men feel they can be with other men now and fully let rip, fully let it all out. But a big part of this work is the grounding work. It's like coming home into the body, down into the hips, down into the floor, strong and sturdy like a tree that can bend in the wind.
Mm.
And then you can move up to the heart. And I think then, because all heart centric, a man that's completely heart centric, or not completely, but spends too much time in that feeling realm, I find in my life, I got very overwhelmed. I was constantly hijacked by my feminine tides in my 20s and early 30s. I didn't know what to do with all that energy and
Mm.
emotion.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting too, like looking at like the energetic poles in the body and like the patterns that occur. Like men's positive is down in the genitals, women's is in her heart, and like we can see where we get stuck, and like that mirror almost, or like where we get stuck and what needs to be cleared and healed so we can allow the energy to flow again. Like it's really beautiful to see, and it truly excites me for like future generations, for the work that we're doing now. Like we won't see the result of this fully.
Yeah, well said. Thanks for mentioning that, actually, because this is so important that it's happening now. that we're kind of figuring this all out now, like deconstructing it, reconstructing it, figuring out for the next future generations. And I know that human design is a big part of your life and my life.
Yeah.
And I know that we're coming to a point somewhere, I think it's 2027, the cross of the sleep phoenix, where there's a whole new layer of sovereignty incoming. And so what the next generation are going to do with these teachings is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and it's important to note that this shift is moving from the mind into the experiential of the body, of embodiment. Really integral to highlight, because sometimes, like, I know as a human being, I'm like, I wish more people got what I was talking about. I wish more people were like getting this, because like this is where it's going, guys. You need to be able to feel, you need to be able to have awareness of these things, to be able to touch and hold and stay in these experiences and communicate from this knowing. So it's going to be very, very important where we're going in the future. But, you know, again, we're going to be at the dawn of that new, timeline, and it's going to really matter what we do, whether or not you have children, because you become the role model, the embodiment for that frequency of people watching you and observing you too, and being in your presence. So it's really important. And I think this really ties into a lot of the questions that I was having before this conversation about like the masculine leads and then the woman surrenders. And I'm like, I don't know about this. Let's talk to Alex. So I would love you to, share with us again, like what your definition of leadership is and how that pertains to the masculine and to the feminine, and maybe in a relational sense. Anything you personally want to share, or welcome, Alex.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think we're getting to the essence of what we wanted to unpack in this conversation, which is exciting. And yeah, just a caveat that we are still deep in the exploration phase. I know I am, of unpacking what this really is and how this works.
Yeah.
This is a life project, right? So
yeah.
Excited to swim more questions than answers. But and something really landed for me last year in terms of the leadership part for helping men access their masculine leadership. And once they have that pinned down, especially in the program that I use for men, we then move into the idea of, okay, feminine leadership. What is that aspect of you that can lead from that place?
Wow.
And how do you cultivate both energies? And
Beautiful.
so yeah, a lot of our conversations have been around like unpacking this fixed idea of only the masculine leads and the feminine must follow and surrender, which ties back into the kind of wounded maiden energy that we're going to unpack. But in the work I do with men, we establish the fundamentals of what it means to have strong masculine leadership. Like, how does energy work? What are the fundamentals, like structure and integrity and grounded presence? Is that just an idea in the mind, or can you breathe and hold structure in your body and feel that as an embodied experience regularly, every day of the week? And you come back to that place. And obviously emotional regulation and shadow work, because we're always going to get triggered and underpinned, and we're always going to collapse at some point in the day or the week, right? So how quickly can we flex back to a place of embodied presence and really be with what's occurring? So chaos, resilience, and capacity, to me, are huge aspects of masculine leadership, as well as feminine, but definitely masculine leadership is about reintegrating these micro moments of intensity into our lives. And so our ability to remain calm, grounded, and present with intensity, whether it's internal emotional intensity or the phenomena of life coming at us, that's a real life skill right now. And we don't have anything embedded in our culture that teaches men to constantly be in that space. So that really appeals to me as kind of setting the substrate of the work, is like into the body, utilizing these energies, these foundational energies of structure and presence and grounding, and then moving into more of the integrity piece of like, okay, how do we make decisions and choices that help reduce the complexity of life for people we're with or for ourselves, so that we have an easier way of moving forward towards a specific point, which is classic masculine energy. Is that masculine tends to single pointed focus, going in one direction, but really going there with conviction.
Mm.
And I love that aspect in me, but it's not always the way I like to operate. You know, sometimes I like to be in a completely different intelligence, which is my feminine.
I love that you called it a different intelligence, because it certainly is. It's like two operating systems coming together. And so I'm really curious to hear more about what's that integration process like for the men that you're guiding. Like, once you've established this masculine system of leadership into their bodies in a, you know, in that way you were describing, and then what's it like when you start to integrate the other sort of feminine leadership? I'm really curious to hear about that.
Yeah. The first point of access is I usually ask men to consider their emotional release practice. Like,
Mm.
how often do you just make yourself busy or distract yourself from what wants to be felt and what wants to move through you? And a lot of men, yeah, just they're not well versed in this. They've not cultivated a regular practice of body movement and taking time to actually truly feel what's in there. And
Mm.
if there is unprocessed grief, it will first come out as anger or rage. And so we provide a process for, like, okay, let's get to the rage. Let's let that out first. It's okay. Let's go there. And that's why the Menswork circles that we have and workshops and retreats are so powerful, because they have very sophisticated processes to help men get to that initial intensity of anger, intensity of rage. And what's usually behind that is a deep grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not every man is grieving deeply or deeply traumatized in that way. Like, it's not something you have to force out of someone. But if a man feels ready, he can, especially with the eyes of other brothers on him or the witness effect of other men around him, he's like, okay, this is a safe place to do this.
Yeah.
I can kind of go, you know.
Yeah, it's that like loving witness and like communal approval for your human experience, I think, is what can really contribute to the revealing of that deeper emotion. You know, and to be honest, this is what makes a man trustworthy to me. It's having the integration there, and likewise for women. Like, a woman's trustworthy to me when she's got an integrated masculine. I
Yeah.
don't think enough people talk about that either. It's like, oh, she's so feminine and so open, but like nobody wants to have to look after a little girl. I don't like having friends that are like that. Um,
Oh, big
so
topic.
it's important to talk about that side of it as well, because there is a lot of pressure on men, a lot of pressure on men to like lift up. But then what I don't see happening is the women being to the point of integration where they can hold their men up. Because I was recently talking about how women initiate. We initiate, we can bring men to these experiences and our children too. And we are then strong and responsible and capable. And this is what feminine leadership is to me. And like, she doesn't just surrender, she activates and then calls them forward. It's like she is the call and then you answer, and she will hold that position, hold it until he's there. And I don't see enough of that really happening.
Yeah, I just got shivers down the back of my neck, because that energy, when we as men encounter that energy from a mature woman,
Mm.
it's the dual effect of her having both those energies integrated, of the masculine and the feminine. But she's, like you said, that she activates something, and then she can hold with that kind of patient, loving, wise, benevolent mother energy, waiting for him to come forward. We had actually, in the last retreat, we had some of the women, some of the partners of the men were
Mm.
in the kind of integration call, and it was mind blowing, because they were talking about how long they'd actually held that loving space of waiting for the man to come back, waiting for the man to come back home to his heart and to his expression.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. And these
Yeah.
women had done the work, they were doing the work. So the work, quote unquote. What does that mean now, the work?
I just and like I say this as a woman who has really not been that woman as well. Let's be honest, because like I've definitely been like, I'm gonna be in my power and call him forward, and then I just can't hold it when he's not there. And I'm like, why isn't he here yet? And get all impatient and like, I I can have this observation now because I've been through this cycle and I'm still working to like integrate that. But it's a pattern that's rampant in my industry on the feminine side of the coin, where it's all like, we're in our sacred rage and where are the men and fuck the patriarchy and all this shit. And I'm like, you're putting your attention in the wrong place. Feminine leadership is not that.
It's so refreshing to hear that from another woman, and comforting. And yeah, I want to caveat also that I have struggled intensely like over the years, and every partnership would just bring me to my knees because, okay, Alex, this is where you're completely underdeveloped. This is where she has extremely good reasons not to trust you right now because you're just completely lacking in all these areas, right? And
Mm.
yeah, I bring my own brand of magic and this, my qualities, but like it's really important to get this instant feedback from our relationships of where we
Yeah.
can't hold ourselves, where we don't have these energies integrated. And I know personally, I encountered a lot of women. So
Mhm.
usually, this is where the trauma bond would usually appear, and it was a woman with a really deep father, like a really deep father wound, and complete unintegration of her masculine. And also that would have this weird dark chemistry of pulling in me, who has this, his unintegrated masculine and my unintegrated feminine,
Mm.
and my inability to stand with a certain depth of presence and hold the chaos to a degree. I was always the fixer, the pleaser. I was always stepping into the role of, no, we can save this. There's got to be a way. Let me somehow protect all of this. When none of that was, well, not all of it was my responsibility.
No. Mm. It's
Yeah.
and the thing is too, it's like it's always both and. So yes, there's some feminine intuition and there's the wound and the trauma bond and like it's just so nuanced and why it's called work. To like get to the essence of it. But you said something in that example there of why a woman wouldn't trust you, and like this sort of ties back into leadership, but also this concept of what it means for a woman to or anyone to really like surrender and like to just I think that sometimes there's like a talk there between surrender and submit. And this is something that I would love to sort of demystify for people too, especially with the context of women that I see like drawn towards this work and like thinking, oh well, now I just have to open and surrender to any man that I'm with so that I'm a good feminine woman.
Yeah. 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 What does it take to really earn trust? Like I'll
Mm,
often say to him, you just don't trust me at this point because we don't know each other at all. Let's play this game of discernment. Let's dance in the energy of discernment. Discernment to me is a fatherly energy. It's like a really healthy boundaried energy of like, okay, yeah, come on in. Oh, just wait, no wait. Well, let's play with it. Let's smell each other out, sniff each other out to see what's actually there. And you can tell when someone's got those really elegant boundary systems within them because they're not putting up walls and they're not pulling away, but they're kind of just. And it's all in the spine. It's all in the way we hold ourselves and how open our bodies are. But there's an energy there that it's discerning. It wants to see what's really there before opening fully. And I used to offer my heart up on a platter. I'd open up way too soon. And I've been with many women that opened up way too soon and were
yeah.
suddenly going straight into these roles of like, you're not meeting me where I need to be met, and just falling into this kind of wounded princess maiden energy really quickly.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of pressure for someone to be on the receiving end of that.
Hmm.
Um, and I think this this idea of, the feminine surrenders and only the masculine penetrates is obviously completely bullshit, right? It's just not true. Feminine has a different intelligence and a different energy of penetration. Usually it's emotional intelligence. This reminded me of the idea of how the masculine and men can get very easily overwhelmed by a woman's ability to penetrate with emotion. And there is a certain time when that conversation or that interaction can really happen and flow beautifully, but catch a man when he's in the right mood, when he's ready, when he's open to receive that.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because I think a lot of women don't realize they weaponize that. They weaponize it. Guilty as charged. Like, I know I've definitely done that. Bidding for connection where I probably just needed to be with myself more. But yeah, I think the way that you describe that, just emotional penetration, yeah, it's a good checkpoint, sisters. It's a good checkpoint. Because
you guys are powerful.
It speaks to the way that she wants to be penetrated and rescued from her emotional responsibility too. Because every time I would go in there, and that pattern of like, I'm just going to go in and poke the bear with this system, this strong emotional feminine system that I have, it was like, this is what I'm expecting you to do for me when I'm withdrawn and hiding. And I think this energetic perhaps speaks to like the opening and surrender, and like he's got to go in there and get her. And I think that ties into the wounded maiden, father wound kind of vibe as well.
Yeah, and this is a big part of the Dhyana teachings, is that the masculine with his fierce brand of depth of presence and love can open her, the great collective her, like the feminine aspect in the other being doesn't have to be man and woman. With that brand of depth, that quality of depth of presence, and like a refusal to kind of back down. It's almost like my fierce brand of love will at some point open. That is beautiful, and it can happen. Right? There's no doubt about it, because there are layers of, there are layers of energy a man can bring. I'm going to use man and woman because
please do.
It feels easier to me to describe the relationships between man and woman. And just for our listeners, sometimes I'll be describing masculine and feminine energies within woman and within man. But a lot of the time, my examples, my lived life is with man and woman. So I'm going to use that language. It feels comfortable to me. Yeah, and I hope our listeners can receive that. But there are these layers of energy a man can bring in to meet a woman's whatever mood she's in or whatever's appearing in her. And some of this stuff just works a lot of the time. That's why I think it's become codified and become branded and become dogmatic, is because it actually is great stuff. It really works. For instance, the man that's trying to fix what's happening, that doesn't tend to work that well.
No.
Or the man that's very empathic and emotional, kind of like, like almost takes on the shape of the woman he's with, and blends his heart with hers. And that's beautiful. I mean, I think a lot of women just want to be met there, because they've known as men that were not particularly emotionally intelligent. Then there's another layer, which is this layer that I think a lot of the polarity teachings seek to emulate and recreate. And they do this because it is truly beautiful. It's this idea of this stage 3 relating. If there are 3 stages of relating, if the first stage is the selfish unconscious stage of mostly our complaints and our withdrawals and our triggers, right? But it's also the stage of true need or desire that is selfish, which is beautiful. And then you have this second stage, which is the healthy stage of like trust and clarity and resonance and having healthy conversations about what's arising, right? Beautiful. That's what most of my coaching is actually about, getting couples to that stage so they can hear each other. However, it's not particularly sexy because there's not much erotic charge there or polarization, because it's kind of like finding resonance. There's safety, but safety in and of itself is not necessarily going to give you that hot fuck energy.
Yeah.
And so the third third stage is this artistic stage, which Deida and John Wyman talk about beautifully. And they've even held up their own hands to say that they've been stuck in these stages in their own relating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to hear that the teachers at the top of their game have been honest about the fact that this stuff doesn't always work, and we can all end up disappearing up our own asses with our teachers. So, but the third stage is still a bit of a mystery to me, because I've touched its shoreline on a few times, and it's worked so well that it becomes addictive.
Right.
And you feel like you've always got to be in that stage, or as a practitioner, I've got to access that as the fine art all the time. And you can end up sacrificing the other stages as if they're not important. They really are. It's okay to be selfish with our needs sometimes. It's okay to sit down and have the conversation. But sitting down and having the conversation too much can get a bit flat. So that third stage is about penetrating or playing with the energy, or using energy and movement or theater to create and liberate something in the moment, and it unstucks things. That's what I've noticed in my interactions, is we go from a potential fallout or an argument straight back to connection, and it is then the clothes come flying off and magic happens.
Well, I'm actually glad that you framed it like this, because I personally have never really heard the 3 stages, and the fact that they all exist together. So that for me was quite demystifying, because what I see a lot of the dogma around is stage 3, and how to, that's the holy grail, that's where you need to end up, and this is how it works. And this is where, my inquiry with you around what is authentic and embodied versus for effect and not genuine, and contorting ourselves into these roles to get to the hot steamy sex. It's the possibility or potential to bypass the thing to have that is kind of where it makes my spidey senses creep up a little bit.
Yeah, the performative piece that then turns into fixed kind of response, that then turns into this. It's the shadow of stage 3,
Mm-hmm.
The shadow of stage 3 is, this is the one and only true art, and we have to be in this place all the time, otherwise we're it's not doing it right, we're not doing relating right, and it's just it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure to have to be that in that space all the time. And I just find that most of the time, our relationships, we don't really need to think about it when both partners have found that depth within themselves of a good sense of integration. Because I can feel when a woman's got really strong integrated masculine energy, it's such an interesting feeling to encounter.
What's it feel like in your system?
It feels really nourishing and safe. Safe that I don't have to play a performative role or suddenly step up into the role of savior or rescuer. It feels safe in that I can kind of step back, and it feels sexy as fuck, if I'm honest. Really sexy. It's very alluring, because there's a sense of this. Look at you, look at you go. Okay, this is something I want it. Slightly intimidating as well.
Yeah,
it's hot, because it's okay, there's something really to play with here, really to bounce off.
Yeah, can't fuck around kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because those words are very commonly, at least in my world, associated with the mother. And I always felt, I'm no, these have a masculine texture to me, not just a mother. It's kind of well, if I think about those 2 archetypes, they're both embodied too. So of course there's going to be crossover in the texture and essence of what they feel like in someone else's system. But yeah, I think maybe they have a slight different effect on the opposite gender, perhaps, on what that feels like, depending on the wounding and what has happened, I guess, depending on parents and such. But interesting that you use those words.
Yeah, Yeah, it's a wonderful energy to encounter, and
Mm,
you can tell it straight away when someone's got it installed in their nervous system, and they can bounce between the two.
mm. Yeah.
Comes across in every
Say again.
it just comes across in everything, all the transmissions, from the way messages are written to the way you greet someone to the way you watch them walking across the room or across the plaza. It's like you just feel it in them.
Mm. And I think it does, you know, it's not just this natural thing. Like, I mean, maybe for some people it is, like, I don't know, but to get to that level of integration is just requires so much dedication and devotion. So yeah, it's really palpable when you're in the presence of someone that's doing that. And I'm just grateful that you exist and are doing this work with people, Alex. I'm so glad.
Vice
um,
versa. Yeah, the
Thank
feeling
you.
is mutual.
Yeah, I
I know that. Sorry, I have to say this. I know that you take the women you work with to a certain depth. That it's rare that I see female embodiment teachers on IG that can take women to the depths that you take them to,
Thanks, Alex.
and that's why I reached out to you.
Yeah, it's a distilling process for sure to like get down to like for me, I'm always interested in like the deeper things. So like people say they want this experience or this is where the problem is and they want it solved. But deeper down, like there's a much bigger gaping hole that needs your attention, so that your energy is able to flow and transform those things secondarily very naturally. Um, but like I said, it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone, this work. And I'm starting to realize the more I focus on that depth, uh, the higher caliber of woman comes forward because it's not for
Wow, well said. Thanks for
everyone.
calling. We can't. I find this in pressure, internal pressure, sometimes when I'm with a certain kind of client, and there's a
Mm,
part of me, that performative part of me, that wants to kind of force them to get to a place that there's it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to be possible because it's too much to ask,
yeah.
and I don't want to end up demanding something from a client that's just not ready to go there or doesn't want to go there. Like it's not useful for them. They don't need that. They need something else.
Mm,
There's a hunger for that. Hunger for depth actually is fractal. It appears in so many places in our lives. We can end up wanting to force it out of our clients or force it out of our relationships or force it from our partners. Um, and I
mm,
find this with a lot of the couples I work with is sometimes there is just a place the partner wants the other partner to go that they just can't go. It's not somewhere that's native to them. They're not going to arrive there. And then that partner can tend to fall into the kind of the perpetrator role, the
good old
villain of
victim
like,
consciousness.
yeah. It's like it's so interesting working with that dynamic because it's in everything. But
Yeah, it is. And that's like I feel like a beautiful segue into perhaps, some of these tropes because uh well, even just the definition around what surrender actually is, because I think that's what led to the trope conversation anyway. Because sometimes there's an intelligence, at least is what I perceive. Please tell me what you see. But there's this intelligence sometimes of my body just won't open. I can't make myself get to that place. Perhaps it's not the correct time. Perhaps it's not for me. Perhaps that person isn't the right person for that experience. Doesn't mean you completely teetotal the whole thing, or maybe it's true to do that. But sometimes that's the wisdom and not like trying to make it something else and force the surrendering or opening to happen.
yeah, I have to say this one is a big mystery to me.
Hmm.
And I know it's very much alive in the conversation we were having as about trying to force surrender. Or is it surrender or is it opening?
Mm.
What does the word really mean? It's become used so much that I think it might have lost a lot of its meaning. And I see some practitioners out there that talk about their long-term relationship and how they've gone through many arcs of just staying with what's there, and the many times they could have packed it in, but they chose to stay and commit to the mystery of what would appear, and they had deep revelations in that space. So it would be important to ask couples who've really been through this what has worked for them. All I can say in my life is that there were women that I loved deeply that in the end didn't want to open. And they had many good reasons not to trust me or the connection, but they also had deep wounds inside themselves that they were still coming to understand and work with. And the work was not between us. It was meant to be elsewhere when those relationships ended. There are micro fluctuations when there are closures. There are mini closures and major closures in a relationship, right? And I think this is the beauty of the feminine oracle, which I'd love to talk more about with you, how you view that archetype. And the oracle has extremely perceptive powers, but sometimes is it oracle or is it trauma? Is it her projection or is it her inner wisdom? Right? And I think a lot of men can feel this intense pressure of like, I've got to be perfectly in masculine practice so that I can activate her surrender, and it's all going to follow the formula A, B, C, D. We get to, hang on, it's not working. Why is it not working? Because it's a fucking mystery and it doesn't work like a formula. It's a practice. Is it a practice? Do we do polarity or does polarity do us? Hang on, what's going on here? It's so complex. So
yeah. Like
I'm going to go off the tangent, so if you could bring it back.
That's okay. I think for me, defining words is really important within a context, especially through an embodied lens. Like when I'm working with a body, with someone or a group, it's like, okay, we're going to unpack this theme. Let's look at it, even through like a polarizing sense of like, okay, light, shadow, gray area. Let's look at what the implications are, because I don't see a lot of women. They're just like, this is what it is. Apply it, put it on like a costume. This is kind of it. I'm always interested in we think we're looking at this and then bam, we're looking at the complete opposite shadow. We're looking at the blockage to that. And so like you said with is it the oracle, is it trauma? I think there's working with the body and working with the feminine. And for me, it's predominantly the emotional system that needs to be cleared out before we even start to integrate the sexual stuff, like sexual aspect. Because if that emotional body is not clear, the tendency for trauma to come, and the sexual trauma as well. So I'm like sort of dissecting it to bring it back together. But if both of them are muddy waters and not flowing at all, versus at least the emotional body is clear, she understands the different textures and frequencies of what those feel like in her body, then she'll be better able to articulate, oh, this is where my mind comes in, this is where I can see a pattern, this is what is true. And so a lot of the work, and I define surrender, I tend to use the word opening, because it's being available to what is true, and that is always changing. So if you're not in a practice of being with what is, of opening and serving that opening, that's where the wounded patterns start to come out. It's like, oh, I'm just going to surrender and not do anything, because opening requires a active force and an alertness and a responsiveness, and surrender is like, yep, very passive, not going to do anything at all. And that's my understanding of it, because I used to use the word surrender a lot and I didn't really know what it meant until I had to really look at the energetic tone of it. And then that's why I landed on the word opening personally.
Beautiful. You've distilled that in such a beautiful way, that clarifying the mental realm, coming down out of the mental realm, thoughts about what's occurring, and then into the emotional realm, and how helping when you work with clear that emotional energy space, So then they can move into the next piece, which is the deeper embodiment, and then whatever opening is
Yeah.
wants to come through her, like the
Yeah.
intelligence that wants to come through, like how does she want to respond next? And I
Mm.
guess if there's an opposing force of a man with her who can dance with that,
Yeah.
who is available to that, then that's, I guess, magic will happen in those moments, right?
Yeah. A lot of it really is approval work, like being in approval of what is there, not having a story about it. Dissecting the story, telling the story, sure, but there needs to be, at least what I see, far more practice in being with the emotion without the story. And I think that's what starts to cultivate the oracle. And,
Oh, wow.
I see that being a big part of, you know, removing the stigma around emotions too for men, because it's just an energy. It arises from the mystery, it comes from nowhere. And yet I see so many people, what's wrong? We tell each from children, oh, what's the matter? What happened? What have you done? Mate, the kid's just crying. Like, let her cry, let him cry. Are they angry? Let them be angry. Like, you don't need to make a story. And like that is planted in us from as soon as we can understand language, or even before, because like even to babies, like there's got to be something wrong for any emotion to be there. So it seems to be a problem. And it's making me really think about that so much, because if we remove that, what would be possible? It's emotion would just be emotion of the mystery. It comes through us, just like our sexual energies, like comes through us and then it moves down and out, and then we're just available to the wisdom that comes through the experience, versus like getting so head fucked and like attached to like the story, and this is why I'm so angry. And I'm like, you're just cutting it off. You're just cutting it off and then letting it stagnate and build. And trust me, it creates illness in your system. It will come for you if you don't let it flow.
Wow, that's knockout stuff. The
uh,
meaning making behind emotion and the conditioning from childhood of how we've had to manage and label and how people react to what's just coming through us. Like that's a
mm,
huge piece of this, right? Huge. It reminds me of a story a friend was telling recently about, I think, his sister's child. All the toys got knocked over, or a piece of Lego, and he was like, "Oh my God, we've got to fix it. We'll fix it. Don't worry, we'll fix." The child's crying, and he's like, "No, we'll fix it. We'll get it all together." And she was like, she beautifully pointed out that the child didn't need you to fix the thing. What the child needed was for you just to be with the child and be with them in their response, to let it move through them. And I guess
mm,
since day one, we've had this dysfunctional way of relating, where our emotions have to be managed in some way. And I think this ties in beautifully to the theme of capacity, like the masculine's capacity to be with the
mm,
feminine storm, right? Because it's going to get stormy.
yeah,
And the beauty of the feminine's ability to process that storm without making too much, applying the mental realm to it too much,
yeah.
filtering it too much. And then the dance becomes really juicy, doesn't it? Because what happens when someone's crying in sex?
Oh, mate, I cry all the time. I've warned
Yeah,
people. I'm like, look, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. I just that just moves, energy just moves through me like that.
totally.
There's nothing
Beautiful.
wrong. And they're like,
Nothing wrong.
and it still happens, and they're like, oh, I'm like, no, it just let me cry. Just like don't try. But it's like so innate, and like I don't want to make it wrong, because like parents just care, and like it comes from a good place. But I wonder what's possible if we can, embody this ourselves for the next generation, like of children, and just show them, hey, it's cool. It's cool to have emotions. We don't need to
Yeah.
control them. We just need to understand what they are, why they're there, and that actually they are such a beautiful way, just like sexual energy, of connecting, of coming back to oneness with ourselves, with each other. Um, and so
Yeah.
I think this opening versus surrender seems to be really valuable for men and women, for masculine and feminine, because also when you work one thing, you're automatically working the other. And it just sort of came up when you were saying that, like I'm working with women to become more fluent and masterful of feeling their emotions. But naturally, when they do that, they become integrated in their masculine because they're staying with the experience without the story. So it's always happening on multiple levels. You don't need to talk about it here. You need to feel it more.
Yeah.
At least that's been my
Yes.
experience.
Absolutely. The way I love teaching men about this is because intense emotion is the great example of this, of like going into collapse or crumbling and then reforming the structure of your body. Once you've collapsed, like, it's beautiful to collapse. The idea that the masculine, the man, should never collapse and always be 100% upright, like, fuck off. Like, come on, go and fucking become a mess. Let it all like snot flying everywhere. Again, I'm going to use extreme example of grief. But grief is like when you, and that involves an act of surrender or opening.
Yeah.
To me, it is surrender, but it's generally an opening of like, okay, let it come through. And for a lot of men, they feel like they're going to be annihilated by that intensity because it's so fucking
your,
yeah.
your ego does get annihilated though. It does.
Yeah, it does. You're right.
It shatters you open. Like, it just does. And like, I get that. It is scary, and but it's not the right thing, in my opinion, to really be afraid of. Because when you understand what it's doing and like creating the collapse in the space of opening for something else to come through, it's like there's no need to be afraid of that. But that's coming from here and what people tell us, and like, it's bad if you crumble and it's bad if you fall apart and you won't be able to pick yourself back up, and all those voices that aren't truly you. They're not even yours. It's just what other people think and say.
It's so true. That's such a beautiful way of like describing the extra layers of programming on top of the already big mission of just being with what's fucking there.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I learned the art of being with grief, and it was, I think it's 5 or 6 years ago. I lost a lot of things in one period of time. And it was a cold winter. And I remember I remember realizing I had to book 40 days and nights of dating my grief, like being truly with it. And it was always in the evening that the main tsunami would come through. So I was in my dressing gown and I had this big red pillow that I'd kind of crumpled down on the floor with. And I let the grief come through. And it was a true meditation. It was a true crumbling, a true collapsing, and learning just to be with it and let it completely roll through me like a tidal wave. And what amazed me was my body's reaction after that, like the relief, the burst of laughter, then the need to sleep, and the understanding that it's like, again, the true embodiment of grief is you let it come through you, and you let it move you, because there is an intelligence in that emotion, and there is a deep intelligence in the body. The body knows what to do. Just cut the head off for a minute. And the extra piece that I'm so grateful for my teachers that allowed me to add on to that was the extra piece of, okay, when you're ready, bring back your conscious structure. Bring back capacity to hold and breathe into that and hold yourself like a lover, like the father, like the sovereign, like the king. But you can only get to that final piece of true, like, coming back once you've fully gone into the death role.
That reminds me too of like how much our mind perpetuates our suffering instead of just feeling it. Like, we just love to indulge in the story of the suffering. I mean, like, that was most of me last year when I was losing everything. Like, my friends were on the other side of it now. They're like, do you remember when you were like such a morbid, like awful person because you were just so depressed? And I was like, I love you guys. Thanks for sticking around. But it's true. Like, so much of it is like, how much more ease would there be if we could take this away and let our bodies just do what they do, nature do what she does, and move through to the next season, move through to the next phase of our evolution, like without the mind there, and like truly letting the mind take its rightful place to serve that opening. And like, I think this sort of ties into like the masculine penetration and leadership. It's like, to me, it's like such a role of service to the truth, to like what is opening, what is being felt. And I don't know, like I think I'm again grateful for having these conversations with you, because whilst there's a certain codified language of polarity realm, I think that it's really important to like break down some of these key concepts like leadership and opening and penetration, like what these actually mean, because those words are so loaded and come with people's own meanings attached to them too, and
Yeah.
experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, beautifully put. Thank you for the tender reveal about your journey last year, and
Yeah.
that's knockout stuff. And I know I can feel how deeply you've processed and integrated, and bringing that into your work now as artistic craft. It's like, yeah, it's
Right.
incredible to watch.
It's going to take time, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Um.
so go.
So this just, I just want to ask you about this gestation period, this maturation period of like how it felt for you to come out of that,
Mm,
and using both of these energies of the masculine and the feminine within you to kind
right.
of this next piece that you're sitting within now.
Thank you for bringing this forward. I actually I feel like, because I went through a lot of chronic pain, and I'm sure I'll speak about it in episodes in this season more in detail, and just when it feels true to speak about, because it is so vast, and like I know I've had conversations with you, we're like, whoa, this could like turn into like a huge conversation, and it will in time. But I feel very much like I am, so I use the seasons a lot as a way of
Mm.
understanding life, and its beautiful cyclical nature, and how they give access points to the emotional body and the emotional wisdom, so of the feminine. Um, so I feel very much like I'm emerging from a 2 year long winter, and I'm just in this, like, imagine the seed that's what using all of its energy to like break through the soil to come up. So like that winter time was really activating a clarity and an intention in me that I had never had before, because like with an experience like that, it really when everything is taken away that holds you up. Like I was just talking about it in the episode I recorded today. So funny you should ask me. But when everything gets taken away and there's nothing left, like there's that grief, but then also what comes through after opening in such a way is something that was never there before. Like it's just it's cleared this path for me to come forward. So as my physical health has improved, as I'm really taking my time to settle back into Australia to rebuild everything, because I literally lost everything: money, house, job, like steady income, relationship, my stability of friendship, and I'm starting again in Australia, like literally reset.
I mean, that's big
It's
stuff, right?
yeah, uh, it's very much spring, and I recognize that this phase might take a year, might take 2 years,
Mm.
just as the winter took 2 years to really come undone and to really see. So like I ask me in 10 years that same question, and I'll give you a different answer. But right now, I'm really just so committed to showing my embodied process and just being a human, so that it gives other people permission, but also like to create the like the recognition too, because like the work I do is fucking deep. It is, and it's not for everyone. And I really get that now. And what I'm here to guide will touch every area of someone's life. It's not just the feminine. It's not just dance. It's not just, you know, and like from the surface, people see, they may see what they want to see in me, but like really what it's doing is so deep. And so after this cosmic clear out that I've experienced, and really a deeper embodiment of the work that I offer, I feel very new but also held by the system that I use. Like I know, okay, I kind of get this terrain now. I've got time. I've got time. I've got clarity. I can trust my body and my system and my design and have the right people around me. And I just feel just one step at a time based on like
Mm,
body guidance and when my head gets in the way. And then it's like come back to my body and let that guide me because what it led me through in the 2 years of like sheer pain and suffering, like total loss, was what needed to happen. So how can I not trust that moving forward? Like I made it through that.
that's incredible.
So
So many layers there of like the macro life picture and moving through multiple storms, everything crumbling and going, and like
mm,
trusting your body, trusting the process,
mm.
trusting deep levels of opening. Would you say there were levels of surrender in this story?
Yeah, this is where I was like, this is what opening means. This is where I got the embodiment of the subtle difference between surrender and opening for me. This is where I really got
Yeah.
that. And like I had to be active in that because no one's coming to get me. No one was coming to do that for me. No one.
Wow.
And I think that's why for me, it was also this is in the phase where I'm like really integrating, oh, this is the masculine too. Because I'd been working with the feminine for a number of years before this happened. And this initiation was like bringing the two things together, mind and body, masculine, feminine, penetration and surrender and opening, like it was everything had to come together to create this seed, which is now about to grow and expand into through this spring phase of my life.
Wow.
So,
Quite the initiation. I can't wait to hear more about this over the years,
yeah,
and as you
me
said, in
too.
10 years, like, we'll still be coming back to this conversation, this evolution of your particular journey right now.
Well, I think it's important to say because, like, how much pressure do we put on ourselves to get to where we think we need to be? Like
Yeah,
the process is trust. Like if you're in your process, that's cultivating trust. You don't have to think about, oh, I need to trust, I need to open, I need to do all these things. If you're in your process, that is the embodiment of trust to me. And it's nothing that you have to teach someone. If you're just like in the process and devoted to the process, that's it. And
and
I don't know how, like we seem to think success happens overnight, but it's like something that grows over time. And I think it's important to be a embodied role model of what that looks like because I don't see it's very glossed and beautiful veneer of like packaged on social media. And I'm like, I kind of want to disrupt that a little bit. And that triggers me too. Like I'm like, oh, how am I a leader if like I'm showing all these vulnerability things? But like I know that's what creates integrity and true intimacy and like is authentic. And that we are starving for that in this world. Like you said, like how much dysfunction we see everywhere, especially when it comes to relationships.
mm, yeah, beautifully put. I think it's really powerful and important to see other facilitators and leaders being as raw and vulnerable as they can, um, and leading from the front, like real life stories. That's why
Mm,
I wanted to bring just into the conversation for the listeners. Is like we are going through our own personal journeys of absolutely freaking the fuck out and losing everything at times
mhm,
and out coming out of the ashes like with these new pearls of wisdom, true hero's journey stuff. And
mhm.
the archetypal journey is always alive within us. So just want to it's good to remind our viewers that we're definitely right in the trenches with you.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to ask me that question because I was meant to be interviewing you, but thank you for bringing that forward. I do think actually we have covered most of the tropes except for the last one, which is a bit of tongue in cheek, which is polarity will fix everything.
Um,
I
Get the polarity out of the box now because we need it.
I don't know. I just feel like if it is so fundamental to like our nature on this dualistic, in this dualistic experience, like maybe there's some truth in that one. I don't know. What do you think, Alex?
There's a bit of truth in all of these, not these cheeky little tropes. Yeah, it's kind of true, isn't it? It's kind of true, and it's also like the carrot that keeps dangling in front. If I just get some more better polarity, then finally I'll have the things that I wanted, and find that it's more a case of clearing out all the crap first and all of the wounded imprints that are kind of impeding healthy polarized connection. Like
Mm.
again, a lot of the couples I work with, it's just about getting them to stage 2, getting them to the healthy place before the magic, the fire and the brimstone of the passion, right? Because our childhood wounds and our attachment patterns will hijack most situations before there's ever a chance to really understand what it feels like to sit in depth with each other, breathing each other in and feeling the depth of each other's energetic currents, and having that kind of cliche tantric moment where the partners are sitting together, breathing together, reaching orgasmic bliss. And that can happen with a stranger, right? You don't have to be in a long-term relationship. But what generally impedes us from getting to this hot as fuck energy, it's just our wounding, our patterns, our stuff, our insecurities, our little triggers. And we can bring polarity can be brought in at every step, at every point to kind of to liberate things, to create more of that energy, to create more of that. I'll just come here, come into my arms right now. I'm just going to hold you, or I'm just going to pick you up, or we're going to go here, we're going to go there,
Um,
or she. Sorry, after you.
no, I just wanted to ask a question too, because can, and this might just be like a really dumb question, but I always see polarity being talked about getting it like hot and like steamy and all this, but like, is it something that can be used to like tone things down and go in as well? Because like what it's like packaged and sold at is that like apex of like the summer or the hot flame versus like the earth and the depth of grief. And like, is that something that's part of polarity?
Great question. I love this inquiry because I can definitely feel there's that part of me there's that addicted lover inside me that's like, oh,
Yeah.
there's always the super hot, like the super hotness to get to. You know, the
Well,
difference between dope,
it's what I see
the,
too in that industry, in that field, being sold because people want that. And I get it, but like I'm curious if that's been part of your exploration or something that's part of the teachings that isn't like at the front door with the hot and steamy stuff.
well, I find that like this ability to slow things down
Mhm.
tends to tends to create this energy or this space where whether something really intense needs to come through, or whether a civil conversation needs to come through, or whether just sitting in silence needs to come through, that energy is actually very deep and grounded and very deep and earthy.
Mm.
Someone's got to bring it to that point, though. Someone's got to be the first to kind of step in and go, right, let's try this. Or, into that interaction. And that, to me, that's a very penetrating kind of creative, co-creative action. And the feminine can do that beautifully. Um, or a woman can do that beautifully by accessing her inner masculine and providing that space, whether it's an argument that's about to fly off, or trying to give real world examples.
Yes, please do. Because that's also
Uh,
like something I don't, as you're thinking, that's something that I don't see a lot. I'm like, where can this work be really practical? It's not just sexual, like where can this be applied to like if you're really drawn to polarity, like you obviously want to apply it to your whole life, not just the bedroom. Like, and this application to me is something I'm curious about, like because I like depth and knowing something really inside and out. So
yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then little micro moments of all of our communications. And a big part of the work we do with men is the integrity piece of like how trustable is the quality of your word and the quality of your embodied presence and the quality of where you're going, like how you're being honest with your heart. This person is one of the great teachings I received from John Wyland is how deep integrity can actually be, and the larger layer of integrity is like your soul's mission and calling. Like, are you actually doing what you're meant to be here doing? Our partners can feel when we're out of integrity all the time. We can feel when we're out of integrity. So integrity is not particularly hot and sexy.
I think it is. It's like it's one of my core values. I'm like, integrity is like creme de la creme for me. I think it's really important. But again, it's not going to float everyone's boat.
I need to plug my laptop in. I'm just going to reach for a charger.
Yeah, please do. Please reach for the charger. Even though I get this sense that we're getting close to the end of it, I don't want you to drop off the connection there, Alex.
That would be terrible if it just
It would be.
But yeah, okay. Well, it's wonderful to hear that from a woman, that how sexy integrity actually is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the men I work with tend to think of it as just a functional thing.
Really? But like, okay, you talk about structure a lot. To me, integrity is creating a solid structure in which the mechanism or the organism can move and stay trustworthy.
Totally. But it's not in and of itself, it doesn't sound like hot, sexy sex time, does it? But it leads to that, doesn't it? It creates the foundation for like the trust, right?
Trust, yeah. Definitely.
So yeah, I think those themes are very important in the men's work that I'm doing. Providing emotional safety
without being daddy.
Without being daddy, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, being able to his own emotionality and then being able to attune to hers, and that gentle dance between the two. Which is just nourishing. It's not particularly hot and sexy. It's just deeply nourishing.
Yeah, definitely is. But like, it's a recipe, right? It needs multiple ingredients. It's not just one thing, unless you want it to be and you're just looking for some fast food takeaway, kind of like something naughty on the side, versus like a degustation menu, sit down banquet style. It's a totally different experience.
Yeah.
It depends. Depends what season you're in your life, or what you want for your life too. And it's not I think sometimes there can be like stereotypes around like the polarity fuck boy, fuck girl, and like it's all can be used and manipulated, but so can anything. And I think having these sort of conversations, diving a bit deeper beneath the surface of what it can appear to be, is really important. And I think this has been a really valuable conversation.
Or you cut out just at the end of that sentence.
Sorry, I was just saying it's been a really valuable conversation for us to have. Just going deeper down beneath the surface of what polarity can appear to be. Because I know at first I definitely had my judgments and like I was a bit suspicious, but the more I'm blessed to know you and have conversations with you and like bring things forward, like the deeper my understanding of it is. And I want to bring that to the audience too, because it is so connected to the work that I do, and it's a different flavor of it. And we do speak it in different languages. And I want to be able, myself, but also for the audience, the listeners, to see patterns across multiple areas of life and see how they weave together in their own self, because nothing exists, in isolation. It all connects. And I think it's really important to have that, if what our intention is to create sovereign individuals and a sovereign collective
Mm.
people.
Yeah, I love the way you've voiced the need for this integral way of being. Like it's weaved into everything. Polarity is weaved into everything, you know. I don't market myself as a polarity coach. I don't market myself as a tantra coach. I don't market myself as a shadow work coach. But it's those themes they're in everything. They're in
Yeah.
every session, every module, they're in every chapter. They're in all our writing, my writing.
Mm.
And they're ever-present themes. It's so fascinating to unpack this with you. I've really enjoyed delving into the mystery with you.
Oh, me too. Hopefully it will be the first of many conversations because I really do want my audience to grow and evolve and get to know the guests that I have on here a little bit more because, as I said, and will continue to say, depth is important, instead of just more and more information overload. So, thank you for being here. I will link everything in the show notes for people, but is there anything you want to add or anything you want to share? This will probably come out in the next week or so, Alex. So if there's anything you want to share with them while they're listening.
I have my programs ready and waiting for any men and women and couples that are out there. And I'm currently stationed on the island of Ibiza. We do workshops and retreats here. So if you want to come to Ibiza and meet me in person,
Mm.
do all the things, do all the stuff, then that's where I am.
Great. Well,
And
I
just
won't I won't be jealous if anyone gets to meet you before me. That's not fair. Um, but
I won't.
yes, I am very, very grateful that we all got to sit and chat and listen to this conversation. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. Bye, Alex.
Thank you so much.